State Representative Jim Haadsma is with us right now. Good morning to you, Jim.
Hi, Tim. How are you this morning?
Great, great. Nice to see you. The big news, of course, about the state auto insurance reform bills. The Senate put one forth, and the governor didn't really think much of that, and neither did most Democrats. But the House came up with another one that was more favorable, but still, you have concerns, and you voted against it.
That's true. I have concerns. I voted against it. I voted against it at 2:10 in the morning yesterday. The process was, to start, flawed. We were told about 3:15, 3:30 in the afternoon that we were going to receive a no-fault bill to consider. We being the members of the House, or at least that's the first time the Democratic caucus of the House learned of that, and then we didn't actually get the bill until 6:55 on Wednesday night, and then there was a lot of hand-wringing and backrooms activity and amendments around midnight, and finally, after floor speeches about 2:10 in the morning this past Thursday morning, we voted on that. Absolutely, I have great concerns about it.
But specifically, what don't you like about it?
It doesn't guarantee the rate relief that is heralded by the Republican caucus. It talks of relief, but for a period of 5 years. That's like a balloon mortgage payment. There would be a lot of, from a capped PIP or personal protection insurance benefits, limitations on what injured motorists might recover, and I'm confident there's going to be increases on the other side in terms of liability coverage. And the only thing that's talked about and being promised is PIP cap. And of course, nothing comes without consequences, and there are going to be consequences in relation to healthcare cost and who's going to bear the bearing of water of this obligation. Is probably going to be Michigan citizens, because a lot of people who are injured are going to be wards of the state, going to be dependent on Medicaid. Health coverage premiums are probably going to go up. So there are a lot of complications of a bill like this. Certainly not a bill that should be considered out of the gate in the wee hours of the morning.
Now, one thing, and you mentioned the rate reductions would be required for only 5 years. But the House proposal would make Michigan a file and approve state for auto insurance rather than a file and use state, requiring regulator rate approval before insurers can sell new policies. Is that not enough?
No, I don't think so. I'm someone who has many years of experience in a lawyer capacity working in the Workers' Disability Compensation Agency. I think many of our state agencies are understaffed and don't have the resources to adequately undertake the regulation that's required. I would not think that that's sufficient, and we want a more muscular proposal to bring real relief for not just a period of years and then have a balloon in terms of an explosion of obligations afterward, but real relief with real teeth.
Well, specifically then, what would it be if State Representative Jim Haadsma could put a couple paragraphs in there that would fix this thing? What would they say?
Well, first, I would want to make sure that the fraud component of this bill were going to be extended equally to insurers. There's a lot of insurer misconduct in relation to auto no fault, and it seems like all the emphasis has been on motorists, and I certainly want to put more teeth in relation to regulating both ways. Also, I would like to make certain that we have a no fault bill which would take into consideration non-driving factors like gender, like education, like zip code, are factors that shouldn't be considered in setting rates. Credit score shouldn't be considered in setting rates. These are real issues that ought to be put down on paper and not left to regulators and often insurers through legislators, term-limited legislators, to regulate.
Hey, and let me, because I don't quite understand it. Are you saying that we ought to be setting rates strictly on driving history, or pretty much, or allow these other factors?
So I would wish to set driving rates on premium rates on these driving factors as opposed to non-driving factors. So these non-driving factors I mentioned are factors that I don't believe should be included in calculation of what premium should be paid by the consumer when the insurer sets rates.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. I got it then. So, anything else that you need to see in the bill before you would support it?
Well, once more, I want to make sure that non-driving factors are taken out. We
Mm-hmm.
want to make sure that there's real relief, that there's not some short-term window. I want to make certain that it's not the Michigan State Police, which this bill directs, but rather some department like Insurance and Financial Services, which is regulating this,
Mm-hmm.
a department which has experience in relation to auto no fault and has expertise in relation to that.
And we've talked about this before, and you've stated pretty much these things before, and have a lot of experience as a trial attorney in some of these areas. So I think you pretty much had your opinion formed. But was there pressure from the administration to take some of your colleagues that were on the fence about this and say, no, you're vote no on this?
I don't know what pressure was placed on other colleagues. There wasn't pressure placed on me. I don't have experience undertaking auto no fault litigation. I haven't ever practiced auto no fault litigation. I practice workers' disability compensation and Social Security disability representation, but no one took me into a side room and said, you need to vote no or we're not going to support you.
Okay. Were there any meetings that kind of like in the name of unity to say, nah, you know what, let's not vote for this?
There were meetings it's remarkable how many meetings there were to let us know
About
what was happening next, because each member can't be told from the speaker exactly what's happening next. So they work through the leadership of the respective party caucuses, and we were brought into caucus numerous times to discuss what the bill might say, because we didn't know it until almost 7 o'clock that night. And then we were brought into caucuses several other times to discuss some amendments that had been dropped later in the evening and into the very early morning. So the meetings we undertook, Tim, were mostly to keep us appraised and to let us know what the language was and what that would probably do.
now it goes back to the Senate, because the House bill did pass, and the Senate can make final revisions. Do you think that they'll do that, or do you think it'll end up getting sent to the governor? And if so, what do you think will happen?
I think there's going to be a lot of negotiations between Senate leadership and House leadership in relation to what they forge, what comes together. Without question, I think that there's going to be a different look to the bill than the one that was passed at 2:10 in the morning on Thursday morning. I also think that the one from the Senate affecting the Catastrophic Claims Association is not going to be the one that we see sent on to the governor. So I think there's going to be a lot of negotiations between Senate and House leadership and with the governor's office in terms of forging a bill that all can support. From my perspective, I just wish that there hadn't been the political gimmick of trying to do this on Wednesday night, early Thursday morning, because there's plenty of opportunity to get this done, and I don't think a different bill than the one that the Senate proposed, which we just got over in the State House, had to be pushed through the State House in the way that it was.
Well, I can't disagree with that, Jim, but on the other hand, we've been wrestling with this and getting nothing done for how long now? And people, meanwhile, are paying more than any state. I mean, our insurance is crazy expensive. Now, do you support the proposals then that would, require that insurers have that unlimited lifetime, but give them different tiers where they can, bypass that catastrophic deal? Or because we got Cadillac insurance right now, and some people, frankly, don't want to buy it.
Well, I understand why they don't want to buy it, because probably their cost of living isn't keeping up with the cost of these premiums and cost of other obligations that we have in our day-to-day life. I think that a very great concern associated with cap to PIP is that lots of people, given limitations, are going to vote for the most base policy. And what's going to happen is we're going to have a lot of people without the coverage that they don't think that they will ever need until there's a car crash. So I'm very concerned about PIP limitations and how many people are going to have out there with almost no coverage, maybe $25,000 in PIP coverage, which is going to be gone in a flash, knowing what I know about how costly
Sure,
medical coverage is. And we're probably going to have increases on the other side in terms of liability. So this only deals with PIP. There's a cap on PIP. There's probably going to be consequential increases in health coverage premiums, and there's going to be increases to the taxpayers in relation to how much the Medicaid program is going to cost, because we're going to have a lot of people who won't have sufficient coverage and won't have somebody else to sue, especially say in a one-party crash context, and they're going to have to, as I indicated before, become wards of the state.
And I hear what you're saying, but we right now have a very high percentage of drivers who illegally drive with no insurance whatsoever. I mean, wouldn't it be better to at least give them the option to have an affordable plan and have some rather than none?
It's an argument many make that we have lots of people without coverage. I think if we're tougher in relation to a plan like the fair and affordable no-fault plan that we have put forward as a Democratic caucus, and make coverage more affordable with some common sense reforms. And I think these are the reforms that Governor Whitmer will support. If we do something like that, we can get real reform in terms of premium reductions.
But is it negotiable as far as giving people the option to not buy into that catastrophic, covered for life, and if they're maimed for life, and let them have that more affordable?
I think it's negotiable in terms of having a tiered system, but I think maybe the tiers need to be increased in terms of what's covered. I really think that if we do something like what's proposed, we're dilute how many dollars are in that catastrophic claims association. The numbers of participants will become very small. We're going to have a very weak catastrophic claims fund if in fact we do something like that. And as I said before, the real question is what's going to happen to someone who elects this low-cost premium and ends up having almost nothing in relation to insurance coverage when he or she gets in a car crash. Well, what's going to happen is they're going to be on Medicaid, or Medicare is going to bear the responsibility if they become Social Security disability eligible or entitled, and then we're going to have consequential significant explosion of cost as taxpayers.
The thing that struck me Tuesday, I was over voting on the road proposal in my township. And after I voted, I was sitting in the car and I decided to catch up on the 200 emails I'd gotten since I went in to vote. And so I'm sitting there checking my emails in the parking lot, and I noticed that probably 4 different couples drove up in older model cars, struggled to get out of their cars. They were in their 80s. And went in to vote, and I'm sure to vote no against a road proposal because they couldn't afford it. And it struck me, you know what? These guys don't need catastrophic insurance. They don't need to be, if they're in a terrible accident, they're 85 years old. Why should they be forced to pay a Cadillac price for insurance?
Well, first of all, I know that you can't judge a book by its cover. Not everyone who's in an older model car and is 85 years of age is necessarily going to vote no on a road millage issue. But
well, point taken, but I mean they're on fixed income.
I understand. And secondly, we look at this not just from one demographic group, but we look at this from a demographic group from children, and children are a very important covered class in the auto no fault chapter of the insurance code to those in the older demographic. Your point is well taken. These are people that probably aren't going to have a life expectancy beyond 7 years, but the fact is many more motorists are much younger than that, and the ones I'm most concerned about would be, say, those born in the 1990s or first decade of the 2000s millennium, and I am really concerned about what happens with them given a long lifetime expectancy. Were they injured and have $25,000 in PIP coverage and injured significantly? People are going to be impacted the most are going to be those people who are injured catastrophically.
Sure.
And nobody ever thinks anyone's going to be injured catastrophically until it happens.
Yep, I know. Yeah, and that's the crux of the argument. Should Michigan citizens have these options, or do we look out for their welfare and make sure that they're covered? But the bottom line is that how many people in the Detroit area driving without insurance? Half.
I imagine, and I don't live over in Metro Detroit or in Wayne County, but I imagine a lot of people are there driving without coverage. It's a reason why some members of the Detroit Democratic Caucus in both the State House and State Senate, I believe, went and joined Republican colleagues in relation to supporting this bill. But it's an important philosophical conversation. What kind of obligation are we under to look after those in relation to limited income will often want to elect the most basic coverage? And how much should the state look out as opposed to allow someone to make a poor choice for him or herself or for his children? It's a very interesting philosophical conversation we could have for a long time and may have for a long time this cycle.
Well, I hope not. I hope we are able to come to some agreement and get some relief for Michigan drivers here soon. And it goes back to the Senate now. Hopefully there'll be some compromising and some tweaking of a bill that everybody can agree on.
I'm confident there's going to be good faith negotiations. I am confident the governor who spoke to me about this on Wednesday is going to be very much involved in the conversation, and she wants to get a budget passed, and we haven't had budget discussions. And I honestly think that some of this rush with the no-fault bills in each chamber is associated with negotiations kind of advantage in relation to the governor by the Senate and House leadership. So we'll see what happens, but I think we have to do it measured. We shouldn't be doing it in the middle of the night on a bill that we just saw a couple of hours before.
So are you saying then that this issue of affordable insurance is a bargaining chip to get a gas tax increase passed?
I think that the Republican leadership would like to make it a bargaining chip. I don't think the governor is going to allow that to become a bargaining chip in relation to budget negotiations. The fact is the governor dropped her proposed budget back on March 5, and we're now May 10, over 2 months later, still waiting for a credible counter. So it's time to get at that. We can also work on auto no fault reform, but I don't think the two should be joined at the hip. And I believe I speak for the governor who doesn't think those two should be joined at the hip either. That is budget negotiations, auto no fault reform, or deform.
State Representative Jim Haadsma, thanks for dropping by. We'll talk to you again.
Tim, my pleasure. Thank you.